there. Sue and I have changed our minds regarding our ratings of this podcast of ours. So we realized we're no longer teachers and we don't have to speak with filters anymore. Therefore, we have changed our rating to explicit due to content and language not suitable for children.
Hell yeah. Well, hello and welcome. I'm Sue Britz,
And I'm Tina Lokkbakk. Welcome to Re-Tired,
the podcast where we talk about what life is like when we put on new tread, new wheels that move us to our next adventure. Hey Tina, good to see ya.
Good
Right.
to see you.
Bright and early Monday morning.
Yes. So I got to share something with you, and it has to do with retirement. And I have not been sleeping well. As you know, I'm starting up a new business. I don't have retirement, not much to live on. And last night, when I had a friend listen to our podcast, she talked about how she invested in rental property. And that's one of the things I'd wanted to do. And COVID kind of changed everything in my little community. The prices were once very affordable. And then it skyrocketed because most of LA bought up everything. And there were big corporations that bought up multiple homes to turn them into Airbnbs. So now the prices become impossible, which was one of my retirement plans. So it sunk and it tanked. And when she told me that she was able to purchase one, kind of spiraled me, I'll be honest. And I didn't sleep well last night because it's very appropriate, this podcast, because I am really struggling about how am I going to retire.
Well,
So that's how I truthfully am today.
thanks for sharing, Tina, because we're keeping it real like this. We're the perfect friends to sit down and have a chat. And keeping it real is I appreciate that. It's not easy. It's hard, and we're here with you. We're here with you for all that matters. But that's how we empower each other. Hopefully, things can turn for the better. And as I'm sitting here, you never know. Don't take anything for granted, right, people?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Are we going to start with our quote today?
Yes, we're actually going to start with was it a quote or was it just a part of an analogy? It actually is a saying, so you're right.
Oh,
Let's make that transition. Okay, then we're back.
all right. Do you want to read the quote?
Sure. If you don't change it, you'll never go anywhere. If you don't change it, you'll never go anywhere.
And I think this actually can apply to the situation with retirement. If I don't change my circumstance, I'm never going to go anywhere. So that quote actually spoke to me. You had written it down and I had chosen it. And I think it's important in all of our lives, even relationships.
Yeah. Well, I think it originally was supposed to mean, something about if you don't change your attitude, it's a lot like a flat tire. If you don't change it,
Yeah,
you're not going to go anywhere. That's where the analogy came from. You got to change the flat tire,
you
and
do.
otherwise you can't go. And change your attitude, change your situation, change.
So sometimes, Sue, I think we have people in our lives that model things for us, and it's not necessarily inspiring us, but sometimes it's the example of where we don't want to be or what we don't want to do. And I happen to know someone who has pretty much stayed doing the same thing, which isn't much of anything. for almost an entire life. And she's reaching her later years and nothing has changed. And to me, I think that's one of the greatest, scariest things, to live a life, you die, and you never experienced it. You never took steps to go out of the country or steps to create a healthier relationship or move when you know you hate living where you do, like where everything is just stayed as a tolerance. I don't know if that strikes you at all, but to me, I think that's one of the things I don't want to do. I don't want to die having not experienced life.
Well, you got to live your life. People, it's about being open-minded too. If you're describing someone who to me sounds very afraid, um, just like to use that analogy, stepping out in the cold rain to go outside to change that tire, it's risk taking and it has to be done. The only inevitable thing is change itself. And I mean, but change happens, and as human beings, we have to adapt, and we are one of the most adaptable species. So we should embrace that change, and not only embrace it, but then move it, steer it into the directions that we might want to try to experience, maybe for the first time, or maybe to get better at doing something. But yeah, if you live in fear and you just sit there and don't and fight change, um, it's not a good thing. And I think the original idea of like a bad attitude, you're kind of describing a bad attitude for life. Yeah,
And then there's no learning growth. Like, I think one of the reasons we're here on this planet is to keep learning how to evolve into the next best phase of ourselves, or to learn the next best thing. And maybe that, again, that's why we got into teaching. I don't want to quit learning. I love learning. I can't. Even our topic today of Title IX, I'm like, huh, cool. I'm going to read some more about this. I want to learn a little bit more. So even the podcast has been an opening learning experience, right?
absolutely. I mean, that I love the idea of that kind of change. To go into a new circumstance and try on a different part of who you are, and see how it fits, and maybe hone something that you're doing. I think, to me, that's exciting. You have to remember to get out of the doldrums and do those things. That's what makes it exciting. So it sounds like this person you're talking about maybe hasn't learned how to get out of a doldrum, and that when you keep practicing how to avoid things, that's all you do. You got to practice
Ah,
change.
right. And every time, I even see it in the evolution of this business I'm creating. Every step I take is that little bit more edge of a confidence, right, to move forward. And
Right.
it's by trying. It's by trying. But I think it's hard if you don't really feel excited about what you're doing. And I think
Abs-
that's another thing that can keep you stuck. And in my situation, even on the hard days, I'm so excited about what I'm going to do that that's what propels me forward. But I have been in other places and situations where I'm not excited and I don't move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true. I think that's true. That's what gets people going. And to get out of that doldrum, you got to just be reminded, be around people that remind you, or be stimulated by something, whether it's maybe a great podcast, or maybe a book or something else
Or
that
even
gets
a
you,
TV show.
uh huh,
As simple as
uh-huh,
that could be inspiring.
that
But
reminds you, uh huh.
I'm also thinking of this person who really watches a lot of television. Um, there is this element called action, because we can absorb, but you actually have to like take action. Like, hopefully those things, like when I watch sometimes, it does make me want to move into action. So I think there's another element to that, right? We can be inspired, but there's the level of action.
That's really cool. I think it's going to tie into our topic for today, the idea of action. So let's transition to action. Today's topic is Title IX. Tina, do
Yeah.
you know what Title IX is?
Well, I do now. Uh,
Isn't that crazy?
I didn't really, I'll be honest. We talked in our last episode with Kate. I didn't really know until about 10 years ago. And it was a friend whose wife was talking about Title IX allowed her to play basketball. And I said, "What do you mean allowed you to play basketball?" She was about 10 years older than me. And she was allowed to play because of Title IX. And I thought we've always had girls and boys basketball teams and softball and baseball, and we didn't, Sue.
Yeah, it's true. Let me read to you what Title IX is. It's just one big long sentence. So here we go. No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied of the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Here's the part that's interesting, or teachers. And this is about educational code. So what happened basically was, and cut in whenever you want. Basically, the civil rights movement had all these things based on um, race and ethnicity, but it did not include gender. And so what they did was decided to go ahead and pick up that part that was missing in the civil rights legislation. So Title IX was a follow up to the passage, it was a passage added um, from the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so the idea here was it was a parallel law that would prohibit sex discrimination against people employed at educational institutions, but also students as well.
So I found my information from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and it quoted and had its own definition of Title IX. But you know what was interesting? I'm just going to throw it out there because I took notes. This also, it said, includes pregnancy and gender identity.
Right. That's what's coming up in more. Well, the pregnancy part was something that happened in the earlier years too, but the gender identity, that is now what's being focused on. So that's really being revolutionized. People didn't really discuss that back in
So
the
this is what
day.
my question was to you, actually. When it talked about gender identity, we're very aware of this, especially in education. Was this written back then? Like even
Yes.
the gender identity? This isn't something that we added since we've become more evolved and forward?
Well, it's the interpretation of that one sentence of legislation that passed that we're talking about today.
Ah,
So here's where, we talked about Title IX. How is it that we don't really know all the ins and outs? And like what you were describing just moments ago, where of course you can play basketball. There's a girls' team, there's a boys' team, or there's intramural teams. It doesn't matter. It wasn't always that way. In fact, we know, and we've taught this in our history, how girls' access to education has been it was a hard fought right, just like, and it kind of coincides with women's suffrage as well, the right to vote, the right to be a full citizen of your country. And so we, think of these things in this historical context, or at least I do, and I know kids do too. They're like, "Oh, that was way back when," and those things still are being fought for. Today, we hear about it in the news all the time, which is cool because we hear about it in the news all the time. Whereas we didn't hear about it. You and I didn't hear that about that when we were kids so much. Um, and
wow. I
po-
just had a thought to add in. You know, we're going on about Title IX and not knowing and all of it. And I just realized for as much as we weren't aware and always thought it was, there are still countries that don't even, like you said, there are women that aren't going to school, let alone sports. Like they're at home.
yeah. Well, and the right to vote, and it's something that we women need to keep forward in the forefront because rights are being taken away left and right. In our own country, we've had
Yeah.
the big change.
Reversal.
Yep, and It's an elephant in the room. But here, kind of go back to the idea of Title IX. We didn't hear about it. My question was, why didn't we as kids hear about it in school? Why didn't we get encouraged to do more things? There were offerings of scholarships, whether it was based on
Oh,
participation in
oh,
sports
oh,
or
oh,
anything
oh,
else.
oh, 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 oh. Let me interject
Go ahead.
because I think it goes to the top of the food chain with sports because women
Yeah.
are not economically, mm, what's the word? Women's sports do not generate the income as male sports typically. So I think it started from up there. So since we're not going to be making money for anybody, why do we need to worry about it?
Yeah, back then and now that's changing too, where
Yes.
under the code of discrimination based on gender, uh, like the women's soccer league, the women
Yes.
international, the U.S. women's soccer, are now being paid the same as men.
And
It's like,
that was just recently, right? It's
yes,
just,
yeah,
I mean,
that's crazy.
wow.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just explain a little bit when I went further into the reading from the Department of Health and Human Services. So, for instance, if you are in any kind of university, because I was thinking would only apply, let's say, in California, to the Cal State system or to our junior colleges or to the UC, but any university in the United States that receives money from the government when it comes to counseling, financial help, employment help, research, housing,
Anything.
anything at all um, that gets any federal funds is then covered by the Title IX. And so I went further and started learning about, how do you go about with complaints? So, for instance, I wanted to get help with employment, but it was because I'm a business major and perhaps I, go in to get help and then they don't give it to me because they're helping other people and it turns out they're all men, let's just say. If I were aware, I could then file a complaint with the Office for Civil Rights, which ties back to your civil rights, right? So you go to the OCR and what I thought was interesting because I thought, now what? If I were to go in and complain, what happens? Because then it could be even worse for me, right? Because
Right.
they're going to be notified.
Retaliation.
So
Yep.
I read further and it said that Title IX prohibits retaliation for
Mhm.
filing a complaint by notifying the recipients of its prohibition on retaliation. And so what they would try to do a step further would be that they would write letters, the OCR would write letters, let's say, to the university, and create maybe something for an agreement to allow me to get the help, fairly. Um, they would create policies if they didn't have any. They would go into monitoring and they would do training. And if these things were not resolved and I still could not go in, that's when they would refer it off to the Department of Justice. But I just thought it was interesting. There are steps and but it's also interesting again because I just thought this was all about sports. I didn't really understand that it goes into so many different areas like employment assistance at a university.
And that's what I'm saying. Why isn't this more known, common knowledge? You know, uh, Back in 2011, President Obama reminded schools about to the issues of sexual assault came up, and as a civil rights matter, and that was we saw a lot of that with women in examples, similar examples that went with their coaches that were abusing them. So sexual assault and coaching that came up during the Obama years. Also, Obama during the Obama years, the gender identity and LGBTQ um, code came up too. That this is a type of it's about sexual discrimination, sexual identity discrimination as well. But here, to go back what you were saying, I was as you were saying all this, and stating what I was just talking about, you're asking kids to have the guts to say
Oh,
something and to follow it through. And for girls, okay, boys too, but and for girls who are often trained to be
be
quiet.
submissive.
Yes, I'm talking about maybe not so much kids today. I think they're a lot more empowered than we were. But back in our day, you you could say, "Oh, but there were opportunities. All you had to do is look for them." You're a kid. You don't know the world. You don't know how to look for this or that, and you don't necessarily feel empowered to respond to an offer. Like maybe there was a poster up somewhere, and that was their recruitment. You're like, okay, I'm supposed to read the poster and get excited about it and believe that was a something that could make my life easier, change my life regarding education or treatment at school. So we're asking kids to do
Oh,
this, and that's why I'm saying this should be more common knowledge for adults, but also for kids, so that they can get empowered to and
okay,
believe that this is what the way it's supposed to be. We're not supposed to be discriminated against.
Sue, I just thought of something. If no one knows, you're going to avoid a lot of lawsuits and a lot of messy things.
Well, of course, that's why it all happened.
So maybe that's why we don't talk about Title IX, because then you would be empowering people who would find these niches that aren't being, compliant. And then there would be more time spent having to open up and actually allow more people in.
We don't have the answers. This is our podcast idea here is to to talk about uh whatever comes to
and
mind in
and let
regards to
people
our
think.
yes, and to get retired, to put on new treads, to get knowledge or to seek the knowledge and to embrace people to do that. Um continuing with this conversation about Title IX, it was kind of fun. I came across the name of Patsy Mink, and I was like, "Oh, I remember her. I remember her. That name came up when I was a kid. Somewhere I heard her name. I thought it was really cool. Um, and then it came up recently when I was going through my. I actually had coins in my pocket, my quarters. I was going to do a scratcher, and there was a Patsy Mink um, quarter. She was the first Asian American woman in Congress, and so that's why she's on the
Wow.
coin. She was worked for women's rights. She worked for affordable child care. She was also part of Title IX, getting Title IX through, and so she is an American hero. One of the things that I wanted to talk about with Title IX was how it impacted us as young people. And we originally had talked about that. Uh, this is back in 1972, so you weren't around. No, yeah, you were.
I was 4.
You were 4. Okay. You weren't
I
school
was
age.
thinking
Okay.
about kindergarten.
Yeah, back in those days, they were very specific about what you could and couldn't do. There was no pre K or any of that stuff or a TK.
No, I actually did start at age 4 and graduated at
What?
17 because my mom wanted me out of the house as fast as possible. And I made that November cutoff deadline. Yeah, because my birthday was at the end of the year.
You're kick ass too, so there's that. Um, um, so what I wanted to say was I remember this because 1972 was when the Title IX came out. And in 1974, I was in junior high school.
Holy
So,
shit.
so 1974, some people like, what is junior high school? It's like, for me, it was,
Torture.
no, no. It was seventh and eighth grade. And then our high school was 9 through 12. Some people it's 7, 8, 9, like here
Mine
in
was
it.
5th through 8th.
Okay, so
Just
everyone's got a different configuration. So my junior high was just 2 years, and it was a year that I moved from Florida to Indiana. It was a big change for
oh,
me. It was a huge
huge.
change, yeah. But I remember arriving there, and um wearing clothes from different regions apparently is a big deal. I came in wearing a cute little green dress that my mother had made. I hated wearing dresses.
I did too. And you know what? My mom made my dresses too. It's just
Well,
funny. I did not know you wore dresses and that your mom made them.
it was a
Me
thing.
too.
It was a thing, and like children didn't have it. We did what I did what my parents
We were
told us to
told
do.
to wear, right?
Society kind of operated that way. But my insistence was that I would wear shorts. I learned that as a kid in elementary school. You wear shorts underneath, and then you can run around and climb and do all the things you want to do. I also I was very proud of my stylish penny loafers, and I
Oh,
put in two brand new cute little
copper
pennies, and
pennies.
you bet. And I thought I was rocking it. So I walk into the junior high school in my little green dress and my penny loafers, and I was got kind of I'm kind of brave, and I'm not afraid to go do things and talk to people and so forth, but I am an introvert of sorts. So I walk in there, and they're like giving me the side eye, and wow, hello, Gigi.
Yeah. We have a lot of tourists up here right now, so she's growling.
They were giving me side eye. From this day on, when we have like reunions or whatever, I'm still the little girl in the little green dress. So that's how impactful it was. But I wasn't wearing the right clothing. Hello,
G,
G.
G, come on. Come here. Come
Okay, so the other thing, so that here I am being this different person, and what they wore were jeans, and my mom would say, "Oh, only farmers wear jeans." Well, we're in the middle of Indiana. There are cornfields all around. I'm thinking, well, I love the idea of jeans. Those are so cool.
I wanted tough skins, and it wasn't until fourth grade I got my first pairs.
Well, and again, junior high, if you want these things, I don't want you wearing them, but if you do, you have to earn the money yourself. So I started babysitting like right away, earned money, and bought my own jeans. Okay.
Wow.
I remember going down to the 5 Points bargain, and they would everyone went there. It was a cool shop. We would go there, and they would you'd buy your jeans, and they would shorten them for you. It was included,
Wow,
which
that's
was huge.
awesome.
It was huge. I'm very short, so it was
Yeah.
huge. Yeah. And so I would proudly wear my jeans. It was cool, and mom, accepted that as time went on. But that was something you'd have to buy. Thank God the little green dress went by the wayside, and I guess I had shared enough about my feelings of humiliation with her, which is really unusual. We wouldn't talk about like things like that with our parents, but apparently she got the memo on that one. But anyhow, back to Title IX. This was the year when uh, you would take home ec. Girls traditionally would
Uh-huh.
take home ec,
Of
and
course, to
boys would
sew
take,
and cook.
yeah,
Mhm.
sew, cook, run the
Domestic
finance.
things.
Yes, do the family finances,
That too.
run the home. Yeah, and the boys would take wood shop and metal shop.
So true.
Okay,
And auto class.
auto class. This auto class, I think, was for us was in high school.
Uh-huh.
Here's the thing, though. That year, they allowed, because of Title IX, they allowed girls for the first time, allowed girls to take wood shop, and they allowed boys to take home ec. And so I remember it was a small school. There wasn't a lot of kids, but I was the only girl in the wood shop class, and there was one boy who was the only boy in the home ec class. Of course, I took home ec, and then you had to take sewing the next year. That was part of it. But I said I want to take a wood shop class. It was offered, and to my parents' credit, they said, "Okay, go ahead." I loved the idea of doing wood shop because my dad always did woodworking, and he'd always have us help him with all the projects around the house. So I this was a natural for me, and I was so proud to go do it and be like the first girl. But it was awkward. No one gave me. uh,
how many girls
guff.
were in that class? Do you remember? Were you
No, I'm
the
telling you,
girl?
I was the only girl.
Wow.
And it was cool though. I mean, other girls would I guess later on they'd say, "Oh, go in there and you can get all the boys." I'm like, that wasn't even on my radar.
No, you just
Um,
wanted to woodwork.
I wanted to woodwork, and to their credit, also there was no guff. There was no, "What are you doing here?" I didn't get that.
Oh,
So
that's nice.
yeah, I lived in a college town, so maybe there was a more progressive thoughts there, but down to the individuals, no one gave me guff, which was fantastic. And had I known about Title IX, had someone given me guff, I could have responded and been empowered to respond, but I didn't know that. But anyhow, it all went well. And I did take sewing, I did take home ec, and I did take wood shop. I loved it all. It was good. I love learning. But I loved bucking the system. I knew I was bucking the system of being the a girl who would take wood shop.
You know, a couple of comments. I didn't realize, and I had forgotten about other girls that may not have wanted to wear dresses and were forced to. And my mom took it a step further because she didn't like the short concept. She wanted the underwear to match. So she made bloomers that would match.
Oh my God.
And I never had a say. And I remember having to wear a Snow White dress. Come
What the?
on.
Oh my
Snow
God.
White? Really? Like, oh,
My
right.
daughter would
With
have loved
matching
that.
bloomers.
She would have loved that when she was 4, but
Yeah.
not a school age
Yeah.
kid.
No, I think that was a kindergarten thing, but still. Anyway, I'm I just remember what a big deal it was to get to wear those jeans. And for me it was 4th grade. I had to wear dresses, and this is what's so silly. So, I'm wearing dresses in the winter. I mean, isn't it just funny? And I always look back, maybe this is why I really identified with like Laura Ingalls Wilder, because she was like the rebel. I think I really wanted to be her because she would climb the roofs, she would do the horseback riding like a normal girl, not side saddle, and all of those. She bucked a lot of the things that we're supposed to do.
The conventional norms, yeah.
And I guess I'm just shocked that when you think about it, so we're not that old, and we were still being told as little girls that we must wear dresses. And I was not that little girl. Like, I could when I wanted to for something pretty, but every day I was more the tomboy who played outside in the dirt all the time. And it made no sense to wear dresses.
Well, it still happens today with dress codes everywhere. I mean, sports like tennis, I remember and the
True.
color of the clothing and the length of the clothing, all of our clothes were so regimented about what you could wear, what you could not wear. We just got there was a invite to an event, and it's like, okay, it's got to be formal. Okay, so does that mean a dress? I don't own a dress. I'm not wearing a dress. And
It's funny. I don't even think of that anymore. I would just say a really awesome looking pantsuit,
yeah,
nice slacks and a matching blazer. Yeah.
final thoughts on our subject of Title IX, sexual discrimination and as part of the Civil Rights Act. We keep hearing about the news, women speaking up and being heard, um, people being held accountable for unlawful behavior. That it's very damaging in so many ways. It's important for us to keep empowering ourselves and others to call it out, call things out, and to do the work needed to push back against the powers that be that keep trying to limit women, girls, children, all people. And I have to say, I mean, rather than just be scared, like we hear the how Roe was cut down, we've got to do, we've got to stand up, and we have legislation that supports us.
My final thought is just one of gratitude. And I've said this since I was a little kid and I found out that there were women that had absolutely no rights. And I say today, I was blessed by fate to be born in the United States of America. I was blessed to be born in 1968. So by the time I attended school, I was able to not think about the fact that there were boys and girls teams. I am grateful to be divorced in the 2000s where the stigma is minimized. It's still there though. I feel grateful to be a woman who can start her own business. So I thank every single woman that paved the way to get to here. And I'm so grateful that I was born not having to fight as hard as they did for us. So gratitude, in intense gratitude.
Thanks, Tina. That wraps up this episode of Retired. Thanks for listening.
Until next week, please feel free to lend your feedback or ask questions by emailing us at retiredpodcastnewtred@gmail.com. You're invited to follow us on Facebook at Retired Podcast Newtred. Check the show notes for links and contact information.
Retired is co-hosted by Sue Britz and Tina Lokkbakk. It is produced, directed, and edited by me, Sue Britz, and music and graphics are by me too. Please click to subscribe so that you won't miss your chance to join our retired road trip. We didn't do anything that was explicit, Tina. Oh, gee.
Don't worry. We'll get there.
Oh, God.